Hey fam, Chef Yunha here. How's it going? Today's video is more of a podcast that I shot with my friend Dave. Me and Dave met when I was a volunteer at a nonprofit called the Crown Heights Mediation Center. He helps run a program called SOS, which stands for Save Our Streets. This organization was started in the early 90s, and I've always been a big admirer of both the organization and Dave himself because of the tremendous work they do dealing with reducing gun violence and crime in this neighborhood. Without people like him, I wouldn't have been able to start a business here. And so we get into a lot of big topics, including topics like gentrification. We talk a little bit about the recent protests, and I also got to learn about his background a little bit. He's really a great man, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I've noticed that the audio is much improved in this video. That's because I have some new audio gear and I can finally film proper audio. Unfortunately, I didn't have this for the interview. However, me and Dave were thinking about turning this into a regular thing. We might co-host this podcast together, so we'll see where it goes. So that's enough from me, I think. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Thank you. All right, Dave, thanks for joining me. I've been wanting to do this for a long time because I've always just been curious about not just you, but everything that SOS worked on and some of the people that are involved there. And hopefully, as we get going, you can relax a little bit and, just pretend it's not even a conversation,
Right.
I would love to hear a little bit more about your story and how maybe just your little bit about your life and how long you've been in Brooklyn and how you ended up working with SOS and what you're working on now.
Cool. First of all, I want to say, just meeting you has been a pleasure. To know you working with SOS, nobody was there. And Tim and T House has been very supportive of not only the efforts of SOS, but also personally my outside efforts. Things that I happen to be pursuing, such as music. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity, man. It's a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you coming, for real. And it's like, you got family, you got work. It's not like people can just take an hour or two out of their days, So I appreciate it, man.
Man, it's gonna be a cool hour. So, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Okay.
The way I like to put it at times, the old Best Side, the new Best Side.
And how many years ago was that, if you don't mind sharing?
That was approximately 38 years ago. And
So a lot has changed, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I just turned 38 in June.
Okay.
So 38 years in a month. Right?
Yeah.
So, it was very different back then.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I see a lot of my neighbors when I go back to Best Side, I hang out, visit my family. I have my son, I live there, my oldest son. Of course, gentrification has occurred. Back when I was growing up, I didn't even know what gentrification was. Not mean that I was a child, but I was just so used to seeing black people just being around. Born 1982, 80s baby. My mom and my dad are married. We were married. My dad passed away in 2004 of natural causes.
How old were you then?
In 2004, I want to say 22.
22. So that's a difficult time, right? I mean, it's a pretty young age to lose a parent.
Yeah, man. And one of the most craziest things about that was I was incarcerated when that happened. So not only did I lose my dad, I was locked up, so I wasn't even, I was able to focus on it, but I really had to focus at the matter on hand. And even all the way down to
Sorry to cut you off. And I have to imagine, Um, I see that with a lot of, I mean, there's got to be a tremendous amount of pain that you have to heal from, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, so go ahead. You're telling me about your father, you were 22.
Alright, so yeah, I definitely, when I think about it, tremendous amounts of different levels of the pain. And being incarcerated, already having time in at a young age, being there when that event happening at the age of 22, not really having the space or the opportunity to absorb that, right, to even emotionally feel that out. I had to be on guard, right, so I couldn't even be vulnerable for that moment. And even when it occurred, my transition was at that time from like a maximum aid facility. Right, it dropped down to a medium. So I'm in a medium, and the difference is by explaining this because in the maximum, I probably would have had the opportunity to be in myself, by myself, had that moment, versus being in a medium security prison where it's a dormitory, it's just open. I really kind of had that moment. So yeah, that was 2004.
And what line of work was your father in?
So that's the unique part about my story. My dad line of work was he was a handyman, right? My dad is what they would say he migrated from Barbados.
Okay.
And my aunt, which is his siblings, his mom, his dad, and my grandfather were definitely citizens of Barbados. He came here, started a life doing a lot of handy things. A few jobs I remember him having, one was like a truck driver. He always did like plastering, carpeting, whatever anybody needed, especially inside our house, which was one of the things. My mom was a homeowner in Brownstone inside of Ephesus, and my dad was definitely repairing things in there left and right, as well as our neighbors' place as well. Yeah.
What was it like being locked up at the time? Did you go through a lot of, what was the environment like? Is it on some level getting support in there, or are you going through a lot of violence and bad things?
Yeah, it was a level of both. One of the things, when I first got, I experienced the prison system, I was locked up. I was 17 years old. So, once again, I'm like a child, according to the laws of physics. My brain hadn't even fully developed as an adult at that time. So, I'm going in. It was different levels of it. This first was like first experience. Then it was like what's the experience on Rikers Island. Hearing stories and stuff like that. What to expect. Learning that some of them are true, some of them are not. Noticing that it was people who I didn't see in a long time or some time, and I didn't know where they were at, they were dead. So it was like a reconnection with some of the people who was on the streets and lost their freedom as well. But yeah, I was a child, and it was just like doing, it's like child things, soaking it all up, absorbing it all, being a sponge.
How many years?
9 years and 8 months.
Wow.
Which is part of my story with being part of SOS.
Yeah.
Right, so growing up inside of Ephesus in Brooklyn at that time. As I said, my mom and my dad was married, right? That union was a little interrupted by a substance called crack cocaine, right? My dad, I'm part of that whole cycle when it comes to that. So that's another thing, part of my story that I use to connect with the youth that we work with for SOS, right? Let them know that some of the things that they're going through with their parents, I've been through with mine as well. And having my dad being in substance abuse, having that as an issue, that's part of my story. So growing up inside of the household with that. So when my dad was out with his journey doing that, of course, as a story that everybody already knows, it left a gap inside of my household, right? So my mom's had to fulfill that gap. She had to make ends meet. She's raising myself, me as the baby, uh, my sister as the oldest, my brother as the middle child, then my sister having a child, right? So, excuse my language, she's busting her ass to make ends meet, right? So, and that left other voids and gaps as well. My sister is 15 years older than me. My brother's 10 years older than me. So they more closer in the age range of, mixing in and doing what they doing. I'm really as a baby, virtually just have my friends who I met outside or associates that I met outside. So always went to school, always got good grades until I got into high school. Played sports, played all different types of sports, but really had a love for basketball and football. And music at that time, and my sister supported that. She took notice of it, and she supported it by giving me my first DJ equipment set, right? 10 weeks. I was a teenager. That was my childhood.
You go into the system as a boy.
Right,
You come out somewhat as a man, 27, still very young, but those are some very formative years. So,
yeah.
how did you spend that time? What changed about you? And, what support systems did you have in there? Who kind of, because, okay, if you're in that situation and you gotta be there for that long, at a certain point, I'm sure you're thinking, well, gotta work on something. Learn something. Or I'm sure you learned about the world from inside, which I'll get into this too later. But there's definitely there's some value there that I think you do it every day with the people around you. But I think there's something about I meet a lot of people who, not a lot, but people who I've met, some that come out is that they come up very, there's just something about them that's very strong or what have you sometimes. And I'm talking from a standpoint of, and this is where I think our story is interesting. I think I was very close to having going that way. Because in middle school, I was an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 8. Like I said, we moved to Chicago, Hyde Park, all those areas where they talk it's all in the news all the time. They're always bad when I was there. And
my closer girls from Hyde Park.
oh really?
Yeah.
So I was there. Everything's new to me. I don't speak English at all, and I go to this 90% black school. Obviously, I'm not gonna fit in. Obviously, whatever, but. And then I bounced around a lot. I lived a little while in Atlanta, Georgia as well. I wasn't a great student, to be honest with you. I was smart, but there's a disconnect. And I'm in class, and I'm like, how is this gonna, whatever, right? I don't necessarily see it as helping me. I think something that's very important for young people is for them to discover what they love to do.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
And a lot of times in schools, especially if you're in one of those less funded public schools, it's like a prison for kids. They're actually just shuffling you around, what have you. I had an algebra teacher who
School to prison pipeline.
school to prison. I actually think this also I call this school to restaurant pipeline because I see a lot of that in this business, and that's what frustrates me because a lot of these kids come in, they're smart. I know they're smart. Because they're talking about all this anime they watch and all the characters, so they can follow that back to generations of these epics. Yet, they don't know what they want to do. They didn't get the education they needed. Here's what I think. I think school should teach you 2 things. Number 1, what you want to do with your life. And number 2, how to turn it into a business. How to make money doing what you love to do.
I agree with that.
And there's a lot of talk right now about police reform. And everybody's like, we should cut money, put it into education. But we need education reform too, right? I read that even the poorest schools in New York City, they're spending $18,000 a year per kid. I work with this guy, that great kid, Micah, and he wants to do the real estate business. But it's gonna take him years, if ever, for him to get that $20,000 to put down in his first investment and work his way up. And that's really all you need, really, is $20,000 to get that business started. So why not let this kid graduate the sophomore year and just give him $20,000 cash?
To start his business.
Whatever.
Right.
You know? So yeah, I would like to hear, what you, sorry, let me finish my thought. I'm also coming from an environment where, at a certain point, what helped me a lot was a couple of things. One, my dad's a pastor. So I grew up in the church. I hated it as a kid, but it helped me a lot because it kind of because all these kids that I started hanging out in 5th grade, innocent, computer science or playing games or whatever, at a certain age, it starts with cigarettes, selling cigarettes, then weed, then they start having sex with girls at a really young age, and then the high school kids come in, they start recruiting you into their bullshit, what have you. And I was removed from that at a certain point. I was beat as a child. And I don't support that, and honestly, in a lot of ways, my relationship with my father is not so good. But it did kind of isolate me. I was in a very isolated environment. So by the time I got to high school, my dad moved my entire family to Indianapolis. And out of some miracle, I was able to get into this private school on a full scholarship.
Right.
That changed my life. My school was so ghetto that they lost all my school records. So when I applied to this school, they said, "Hey, what grades did you have?" I said, "Oh, I got A's and B's," and they just believed me.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot I want to get into with that situation too, but a lot of the kids I knew in middle school now are, I think, one of 3 places. They're in prison, they're working in restaurants, kind of like me, I guess, in some way. And there's a couple that did really well. They're like in medical school or something like that. Right. So that's what I mentioned. But having gone from that environment, I went to NYU for college. And I'm in there with a lot of kids who are Ivy League kids, right? Like elite kids. These kids have parents who are millionaires and millionaires. And they're doing drugs and they're doing what? They're not doing them different than most kids do in other ways.
Right.
But that being said, I think now that I see them at my age, there's also a lot of immaturity to them, or there's also kind of a need to kind of fill this hole, which is
They still kids as well. So they still kids as well, probably.
Somewhat. Well, here's what I'm saying. You get out of prison. You're there for almost 10 years.
Right.
You build this life. You may not be a rich man or whatever, but you're a confident man. Can I say that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I have that too, to a degree. Because both of us can have some amount of feeling like I went through some shit that most people couldn't go through. And I see a lot of other kids, rich kids especially, and I feel for them, if everything is given to you, you never tend to have that inner confidence, that real this is a really long-winded way of me basically asking you in those 10 years, how did you grow up? What are some things that was a defining thing that happened for you or whatnot? What did you learn in there? I'm very curious about what it's like to be in there for 10 years.
Yeah, so, and I'm gonna say thank you for that too. So oftentimes I sit back and say to myself, and think about that support, right? Because I'm out here now, and I have my freedom, and I'm gonna show appreciation to those who supported me. And it wasn't always good times, right? When you're supporting them. The tough thing about support is you have to sit back, and the same person you support, you have to let them, grow. And growing is mistakes is part of that process of growing. So I credit my growth with most of my support to my mother, my sister, and my grandmother during those times.
Wow.
Right? So I come from a family of a strong woman. Right?
Yeah.
And like I said, my dad was on his own journey, and he ended up, passing away during my time being incarcerated. So, and this is what the support looked like, even in the times where, and this is when, when I sit back and reflect, this is why I noticed the support, right? Being out in, being a teenager, being out in the streets, trying to find my way to figure things out. Like I said, I like sports, I like music. That took a turn into, identifying the streets, being part of a gang, right? And then those steps right there already lead down to other negatives as well, right? So even at that time, being expelled out of school, being kicked out of school, my mom would be angry with me. She would have my sister talk to me, right? My brother was gone because my brother was also incarcerated at the time, right? So he wasn't even there, right? So my mother would be angry with me. She would talk to me. She would have my sister talk with me. That's where the support was at. My sister would then help me find other schools I was comfortable going to. There was that time she would transport me there. That time she would come get me if I needed her to do that, right? So my sister was like, she became like my road dog. So that was like part of my support system. On the inside, I remember going to trial. We had high hopes that the trial was going to work out in my favor, but it didn't. I remember my mother and my sister. The first time that I saw their face, they were strong, and they just had a healthy message. Like, no matter how much time you get, because I wasn't sentenced at that time, I just lost track. And it was like, no matter how much time you get, no matter where they send you, we're going to be here for you. And I remember Yunha, me saying, when I think about it, when I think about it, at that time, I remember saying, yeah, and going to change the conversation, and they grabbing my hand, looking at me saying, like, no, did you hear us? Like, no matter how much time you get where they send you, we're going to be here for you. And remember, this goes back into the story of me being so young, not really understanding what was to come.
Yeah.
And then getting the time, and then having to do this time. And once again, some of the support comes with the mistakes. Still being doing what teenagers do, still not maturing, not developing. I spend a lot of time in solitary confinement, over game membership, and things like that. And this is where the support really locked in, right? I remember my mom coming to visit me, and she was by herself, and I was usually around it because she would be with my sister, she would be with someone. And when I came out, of course, when I come out to give her a hug, and this is after a while of taking different stints to the box, being in solitary confinement. And it's energy. The hug wasn't like my mother usually hugs me. And she was like, what happened this time? And as I began to explain, this is when I really identified and I noticed the support. My mother was like, listen, either you're going to be doing what you do, or you're going to be trying to make your way to come home to those that's waiting for you. Because we're not going to be doing this. So you got your time, we're not going to be doing this. And they never told me that. They went from telling me no matter what you do, no matter how much time you get to where you go, you're going to be there. But then the narrative changed, and I believed it. And that was my moment. That was one of my moments. Another one of my moments was being on the inside, having, and this is also always happens when it comes with support. Being young, being in maximum security prisons, becoming friends with another person who was around my age, but he wasn't never coming home. And he used to help me identify things that I was taking for granted.
Oh my God.
And yeah.
So your friend is still in there?
Still in to this day.
You stay in touch with him?
I stay in touch with him. I want to write more often than I do. I'll be extremely busy. But yeah, um, definitely.
This is a horrible thing. It's there's obviously a tremendous amount of pain there. Um, a couple months ago, actually, I was arrested for something I didn't do, and they put me in handcuffs, and I was in a holding cell for a couple hours.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Couple hours.
Yeah, that's their tactics, man.
And I think the reason they didn't send me.
You never think you're gonna get in and out of bed.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only reason that you didn't send me downtown was one, the story was like so bullshit, and two, they found out that I own this place.
Okay.
In those couple hours already, like, I'm changing as a person. Resentment is building, hatred is building, anger is building, helplessness is building. I see I'm on this bench and someone had carved into the bench, God loves you. That's helped me out a lot. But this is my way of saying, having gone through all that you went through, how did you start to heal from that? Like, I'm sure at a certain point where you felt like, this is my kind of thing is how do you recover from that? Because the psychological damage is tremendous. I remember even as a kid, somebody would touch me the wrong way or come off the wrong way and be angry, and you haven't had no control over your life for that long, correctional officers telling you when to. Yeah. So I would like to hear a little bit about your journey of how you heal from that and what it felt like for you to hear that when you were 17, 10 years. What it felt like when you got out and kind of, I'd love to hear, you kind of, what goes through your mind? What helps you wake up every day and to kind of keep going and then kind of be righteous in the face of all that happening to you, and everything going around you? I mean, solitary confinement, I can't even imagine how horrible that must be. And that feeling stays with you. I'm sure every day there's a part of you that's still remembering that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty deep. But I never really thought about it. So speaking about support and speaking about during those times, and I'm getting right into the question. Even during those moments of being in solitary confinement, it's like my sister, like my support system knew some of the things that I liked and the things that I could have, and they showered me with them, right? So in solitary confinement, what's the things that you can have? You can have books, you can have crossword puzzles, so they make sure I had books, they make sure I had crossword puzzles and magazines, so they made sure I was able to, utilize that as a tool to occupy my time during that time. When I first heard the judge say, they break your time down, and it's kind of funny how they do it. They be like, yeah, and if you're not swift or you don't know what's going on, and your lawyer's not explaining it to you, then you'll be messed up in the system. So I can just only imagine how our kids are, right? So it was like, my initial charges, I was able to beat down, right? And it's like, for the case of the weapon, we're going to give him 7 years, and for the case of the manslaughter, we're going to give him 11 years, and it's going to run concurrent. So I'm like, what is that? I'm thinking it's 18, and then my lawyer explained to me, like, no, it's just 11 years. You're going to have to do all your time is together. So me hearing that, I was like, wow. And I was a teenager. I really can't see it. I immediately became angry, all those emotions that you had, all over again, right? And they didn't even go nowhere for the first time, so it's like rebuild back up, and then now I gotta go right back to Rikers Island, feeling this type of way. And then it hit me almost immediately. And then another reason why I believe I'm really not a person who was a support. A major part of my support system at that time was my uncle. Right? I really come from Brooklyn, like my family members. My uncle was just coming home from doing time. And I remember him coming to Rikers Island. He gave me a pep talk. And I'll never forget it, and that kind of like set the tone for my mind and as a teenager. And yeah, that was that. So,
what did he tell you, if you don't mind me asking?
He gave me a list of do's and don'ts going in there.
Okay.
Right? And one of them was already too late for me. Right? So, yeah, don't loop in with the gangs, that was too late for me. Don't start doing drugs, okay, heard you. No gambling, okay. Don't borrow nothing from nobody. You don't want anything from anybody. This is what he's saying to me. You're gonna make sure you're right here, so you're not gonna need anything from anybody. Alright? And another thing that he encouraged me to not do was to engage in any sexual activity in there. Right? And of course there's no women, so I was like, alright. And then it was just like, you got your girlfriend that's here, and he was just a realist. You got a lot of time. And her heart, she want to do the time with you, but it may not happen like that. So don't even focus on her. Do your time. And that was it. My uncle's pretty like old school.
And are you still with your girlfriend from back then?
Oh no, but me and my girlfriend at that time, we were still very good friends.
Yes, I'm sure. I've been going through that together.
Yeah. Definitely appreciate her. She was part of the support system, and her mom and her sister as well.
I'm sure when you first got out, there was some amount of, partying, right? I mean, it must have felt amazing. You get to be around women again.
Yeah.
And I'm sure being out was amazing, but also, what are some things you had to figure out?
Oh yeah. So some of the things I had to figure out, mixed with the other half of the question that you asked, how I managed to stay focused. So, coming home, I tell the story to the youth a lot, right? So as I'm on the inside, before I even come home, like my mind started changing drastically after that visit with my mom. Now I'm looking at other things that I want to do. On the inside, they mandate you programs. So if you're coming in, and let's just say a person comes in and doesn't have a high school diploma, they mandate you to go to get a high school diploma. It will be mandated. This is a mandatory program you have to do throughout the day. Or you go to solitary confinement. But either which way you come out of that, you still have to go back. You're spending your time like that. Another one is like a trade. You can go in there and they have multiple different trades where they teach you the basics. They're not teaching you anything more but the basics, right? Carpentry, masonry, custodial maintenance, building maintenance. I chose general business and then mine, right? So I went in, I got my high school diploma in Cookfam, New York. I took my GED on Rikers Island, but I failed it by 1 point. And then when I got to Cookfam, I took it again, and I ended up passing. So that was one of the mandates that I got out of the way. So the next mandate was a trade. I wasn't really too much in, just be a quick story. At that point in time, I really didn't want to do anything. So one of my friends told me at that time, get masonry. I moved to masonry, and I always tell the story as well. This is one of my first experiences about people. The instructor allowed the person who told me to take masonry to absolutely do nothing in masonry. The instructor allowed him to do that. But when I was in masonry, that's what I wanted to do. The instructor didn't allow me to do anything, so he was all on my back. Me and him was having falling outs left and right. So then I ended up taking general business in one of the prisons that I was in. And that kind of worked out for me. I was interested in that.
That's a business lesson on its own sometimes, right?
Yeah. So, unique things, right? So this is the things you find out. So I did that, and then once I had school and the program secured, I was actually eligible to do anything. But at that point in time, I'm watching. I'm inside the door. I'm in my 20s. I'm watching BET. I'm seeing things on there like Spring Break, and then I'm having this thought like, if I didn't do X, Y, and Z, if I wasn't living this life, I could have been possibly in college or a spring break. I'm around the same age. And then I just wanted to go to school. So when I came home, riding the bus, I didn't know. I didn't have a thought about what I wanted to do, right? Like school, yeah, but I knew I was an adult. I knew there was going to be things I had to do out here that involved money. Another mandatory program was parole when you come home. So I had to go to parole. It mandates you to drug programs and anger management. I had to go to anger management. I met my intake specialist. And as you said, me being away for a while, now I'm here. I have a thing for women now. And I'm sitting in front of her, and she's adorable, and she's talking, trying to figure out what it is. You know, she's trying to do the intake and assessment.
Is this your parole officer?
No, this is like inside. This is the program that she mandated to, right? So I'm mandated to an anger management program. This is during my initial intake. So she's doing my intake, and she's asking me these questions that they ask, that we ask now, right? And I can't really just take my eyes off her. So in the moment, I just say anything just to get her to laugh or whatever. So she's like, what is it for real? Be serious. Like, what is it that you want to do with your life? Tell me what you want to do.
Go home with you.
I would say a bunch of stuff in there and no laughing. But in a serious moment, I just happen to look behind her and I see all the accolades that she has for school, right? And then I think about it, I say, damn, yeah. But I did have an idea about going to school. She says, for real? So I was like, yeah. She get up, she leave out, she comes back with a flyer, and it's a flyer for a program called College Initiative. It was based in Long Island City at that time. She made me make her a bunch of promises that I was going to go. And that Friday I went, and I'm just happy for that. I always share that story to say this, you know. That Friday I went to the orientation. As I'm sitting in there waiting for the orientation to start, everybody's coming inside the room. I'm like one of the first people there. As the room begins to fill up, I see a guy that I was just locked up with. So, you know, I'm paying any attention. I'm just like, we just hit. As the class starts, he begins to facilitate the class, you know. And that messed my mind up. It blew my mind. I said, he's teaching this class. I was just with him. We was just together. And it wasn't okay. I was like, if he can do this, I know I can do it. And that just like sparked my motivation right there.
Of course.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of things that I was going to get into.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. I mentioned a couple of things that I really relate to. I'll say this. When I work in restaurants and I hire these kids that are just out of school or whatever, a lot of them, they have two things in common. They are all in pain. And it's two things. One, family situation. They have some family situations not good for them. Mm-hmm. Two is low self-esteem. They have very low self-esteem. And I struggled a lot from that too. And but what changed for me is exactly like you said. I was in an environment where, I mean, people who grow up in a certain way don't know what's out there for them. You know, they don't know what's possible.
Right.
And I was in the same situation, so I went to this private school. And I mean, it was crazy. I mean, these white kids are driving like, you know, Mercedes G-Wagons or something. You know? I had this one kid, I shouldn't say her name. She's not even white, she was Palestinian.
Yeah.
Or she was Pakistani. From Pakistan, an impoverished country. And she comes to school and they learn this watch. I'm like, how much does that watch cost? It's just $20,000. And I just fell into this depression. I mean, I'm coming home every day and my parents are screaming at each other, trying to figure out how to make a little bit of money to get by. And that was actually quite difficult for me to be in that environment and then also show up to the school every day. Mm-hmm. I started stealing money. I started doing a lot of things just out of pure anger. But what changed for me was, it did make me feel like, okay, like, here's what's possible. And I started also learning about some of their parents and finding out that they didn't always have this money. You know, so it started somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I started even thinking, okay, maybe I shouldn't compare myself to them, but to see it as they're a couple generations ahead of me. That's all, something like that, right? Maybe my grandkids can be spoiled like that someday or something like that.
It's a possibility.
And that really changed things around, but at the same time, I became very cynical. And in a lot of ways, that's why I'm cynical about some of these movements that are going on even today. Because if you really care, I will see a tremendous amount of benefit from just one of these people coming in and be like, hey, let me show you around my office. You want to see what a law firm looks like? You want to see how amazing my life is? Come on.
Motivate somebody.
Motivate somebody.
Yeah.
And they can do it. There's nothing really stopping them from even just getting an accounting degree from CUNY. In 10 years, they followed the plan. It could happen for them. But it's really difficult to know that and to see that and to even have that self-confidence. And like you said, that women who helped you, or even a lot of these women I see in SOS helping people around, we both know Marlies. I always really admire those people because I'm like, you're not from this situation.
Big shout out to
Marlies. You could be making a lot of money. You could be doing whatever you want, and here you are helping people out and whatnot. I'm sure it's not easy being a pretty white girl in that situation, trying to help people out. I've been in those situations, and I'm just never again.
So dumb, and she still do it.
Yeah, still do it. I start this healthy cooking class in Harlem, and those kids were so bad, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. Why do I even try? You know what I'm saying? But it's amazing that people will get up and keep doing it. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I was coming from. That's when I started showing up. Because me, I'm always used to being the outsider. There's nowhere, I don't fit in anywhere. I don't fit in with Koreans, because I'm too American. I don't really fit in with white people.
That's deep.
I don't really fit in with black people either. And when I was a kid, that actually messed with me a lot, but that also actually helped me. Just the fact that no one's trying to hang out with you. I'm like, well, I might as well just do my homework. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
But, and also my parents weren't really home. They were both working all the time. And my dad used to do this, which I think actually is genius now I think about it. Every summer, in the morning, he gets up early to go to work. And he'd take us with him, me and my sister, and he'd drop us off at the public library. And this is in the suburbs. This is in Kennesaw, Georgia. There's nothing around for miles. We're just stuck there.
Yeah.
And he did that every summer, year after year. To the point now the librarians knew us, so they kind of it's free babysitting. Right. And we were surrounded by books. So then I started reading and whatever. I think that's actually a genius move. But and that's what changed for me is at some point I did have this level of confidence. I'm like, but also just seeing what is out there, what is possible. Yeah. And I tried to do some of that too, even working here or whatever, helping kids. But this is a hard profession. Not a lot of people want this life. I mean, I probably shouldn't have fell into it either, to be honest with you. But there are
things in life.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm a big fan of the restaurant life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much energy that it takes to put into it, but from the outside looking in, I love it's like the service, right? The atmosphere that's created. And once again, I'm an 80 baby, so I grew up on shows like Cheers.
Okay.
Right? And just that atmosphere when the person walks in on because you regularly know that person. Yeah.
And that's actually why I got into it. I was in a place where I really needed community. I really needed to feel like I fucking belong somewhere.
Like that. Yeah.
And when I started working in restaurants, it's like most kitchens, there's a bunch of misfits. There's a bunch of people who something went wrong in their life and now they're working in the kitchen.
It's like Hollywood.
Right. And it really actually helped me out a lot. Helped me out tremendously. And I remember reading this book Anthony Bourdain wrote, and I was just like, wow, I relate so much to this, but I think that is a difficult thing, and it's kind of funny too because I see a lot of kids who I don't want to put a race to it, but it is a lot of times like person who has a tremendous amount of confidence, so much confidence. And that actually kind of helped me because I'm like, this guy is so confident. Why shouldn't I be confident? I went through 10 times more shit in my life than this guy did. And I try to tell that to probably not. He grew up born and raised in Crown Heights, and he was in this business for 10 years, and now he went to film school, he's trying to be a filmmaker. But he deals with a lot of bad thoughts, a lot of depression and low self-esteem. And I told him, like, dude, like, I couldn't walk a week in your shoes. You're a strong person. You should be very confident.
Right. Especially the things we survive, we beat ourselves up a lot as people. When we overcome these obstacles that a lot of people probably wouldn't have overcame. And confidence, what you just said to me, that's it's very big, it's very important. And you're right. It's one of the things I teach my children, right? Especially I teach my daughter right now, confidence and independence. She walks around the house. She comes and she has said she wants something to drink. And then she walked into the refrigerator and she's opening it at the same time. Right? So instead of me choosing what she wants now, she's picking it out herself what she wants to drink. I believe certain cultures and ethnic backgrounds, they instill confidence in their children from the very beginning. And we just have to do the same. That's like my children know they can do and accomplish whatever they want. And one of the things I appreciate about my children, about the mother of one of my children, my middle son, is from the time that he could like really understand. She was calling him a judge. He thought his name was Judge. Judge Gaskin, go get that for me. He was going to get it. It's like really to this day, he's understanding that Judge is not his name, right? So, yeah,
it's little things,
right.
But it makes a big difference. And I think mindset in a lot of ways is also like money. In that I'm sure you heard about this thing of like compounding interest. You invest $10 today, and that'll exponentially grow.
Right.
A little bit today is a big difference later on. Same thing with children, right? Little things will compound. Maybe they walk a certain different way in school, and maybe they make a little more friends, and then maybe they get introduced to their parents, and maybe that gives them confidence. Like it just snowballs into two. You could totally change someone's life, right?
The little seeds you plant.
I'll tell you what. This is something also I think me as an immigrant person. I always felt like I could have anything that my kids have, or whatever. And that's another thing that kind of bugs me a little bit about, let's just say, like the liberal kind of messaging right now.
Yeah.
Is that they're telling these kids that like they're oppressed, that they can get out of it. And I see a lot of that in restaurants too. Sometimes I see kids who kind of like, they're almost like giving up or something, And I always try to tell them, like, I always give them this statistic. Even if you feel poor in America, if you make $30,000 in America, you're still the top 1% of the world in terms of wealth. And that kind of appreciation for this country,
Yeah.
I think really only comes because I'm an immigrant. My country was, people don't realize, 30% of all Koreans died in the Korean War. We were one of the poorest countries in the world in the 50s and 60s. And and my grandfather was in prison for 7 years for bullshit, really, for political activism, saying things that he shouldn't say.
Right.
And then my father, coming up from the environment, was like, he had a lot of anger towards his own country, and that's why we came here. Little things that Americans would never think about hit me a different way. For example, I was walking here the other day, and I walked on the playground, and the fountains are water for kids. It's at 8 p.m. There's no one there, and it's clean water, and just coming out and coming out and coming out. And I see that, it's like, even though there's a lot of crazy things going on, this is still a very wealthy country.
Right.
And I think if people really put their minds to it, even if it don't happen for themselves, they could set up a foundation that could make it happen for their family down the line. And I always try to tell that, especially to
That was luxury that walk. that's luxury in certain countries.
You know, it's and I also saw a lot of this that Americans don't see growing up is people struggling to get their papers, green cards. You know, I had a friend whose father was in Korea, and him and his mom was able to come here, but for whatever reason, his dad was stuck in Korea, and they were kind of just getting by. And his father ended up dying while he was in Korea and he was here. That messed him up, totally messed him up.
Yeah.
And he was a smart kid, and then by high school he was, you know, doing bad things or whatnot. So I do think there's some appreciation that just comes from being an immigrant and being like, listen, man, like, even though you feel poor, there's opportunities here for you, and you can do it. You know, if I can do it, why couldn't you do it? You know, so I just try to tell that to some of the kids that do work here that I come by. But it's hard, and I'm still their boss, and I'm still someone that people don't necessarily see as like, I relate to this guy, you know.
So I can agree. That's probably one of the major parts.
Yeah.
And I would say major because when I look at some of the success that I had with the youth, that identity was part of it. So he was able to look and identify with me. And I just showed the same things that if I could do it, you could do it as well. But I think I noticed identification at one of my first jobs that I had as I was a group facilitator at a reentry program for the Fortune Society. And my job was to host and facilitate groups for individuals who were alternative to incarceration, meaning they caught a case and they was trying to take a different route instead of doing their time, or they chose not to, they do their time, as well as guys and women who was just returning from doing long stints of time. And identity right there was a major part of it. I noticed where, you know, there was counselors that were there, that were white, they weren't getting the same respect or having the same type of progress that I would get, or that one of my colleagues who resembled myself would get. So yeah, identity definitely was one.
Well, that's a good segue into the next topic I'm going to talk about, which is the big one, is gentrification.
Mm-hmm.
And let me start with this. I think gentrification, if we can define it as money coming into the neighborhood, capital coming into the neighborhood, is a good thing. You know, you want money to come in, you want business to open up, you want things to get better. Right. So I think there's some confusion there that people just think like any business opening up is a bad thing, or that gentrification is a bad thing. I think where it becomes bad is when the people who improve that area, like yourself, you bring a tremendous amount of value helping these kids and helping these people. And your work in the community is what makes it possible for a guy like myself to come in and build a business here, right? It's what that lays the foundation for everybody to come. Mm-hmm. The problem is, I think the way we incentivize people is a little bit broken, because you don't get the money that you built. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So let's say the total output of this neighborhood, let's say from Atlantic Avenue, Eastern Parkway, from Utica to just that square, went from $1 billion to $10 billion over the course of 10 years, let's just say. Because people like you made the neighborhood safer. You should be getting a cut of that, but you don't. And this is also my frustration with taxes, is I pay a tremendous amount of money back to the city. I do. Multiples of what I pay myself, I pay to the city. But that doesn't make it, and that's supposed to be compensation for everything that the city provides. but it's not going to the right people once I pay it. How do you fix that? I don't know. It's a big question.
Right.
But that's something that I wanted to talk to you about for a long time, because you and people that you work with going into Albany houses and de-escalating violence and controlling that violence. There's no gentrification without that first, without developing the community first. So it's not, I think money coming in is good if the people in that neighborhood are able to reap the benefits of the money coming in. What ends up happening more often than not is they either have to move because the rent goes up, or the business that open up don't hire people from the neighborhood, don't hire locally, and don't really make the products for the neighborhood. Now that part of it, it's a free country, they can do whatever they want, but it would be nice if they had some incentive to do that, you know? And I think it'd be actually better for everyone. I think it's actually be much better for everyone, because the way we develop neighborhoods now is the neighborhood gets better. The people who made it better don't get really any of the credit. People come in, but what they build is not something that's like the community as much as like this thing where the average tenant is like 2-3 years and then they move out.
Yeah.
They come in, they do internship, they move out. They come here, they make some money, they move out. And now we have this whole housing crisis and coronavirus, and you see that falling out. It's actually better for everyone, including the banks and the landlords in the city. If you can build that neighborhood and kind of keep that community together and make everybody richer, so that, okay, you grew up a certain way, your father was a handyman, now you're a community activist, you make some money, and then maybe your daughter can become, a real estate owner or something like that, and then because you guys know everyone and you keep the community together, it grows even quicker. And then if something like this happens, you don't have a situation where everybody just dies.
Right.
You have a situation where everybody stays together and they just build it back.
Yeah.
And that's my frustration. That's my frustration with a lot of things that goes on as a short term of the way we think about everything.
No, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, man. So this is what I always tell people is like, I don't think gentrification is bad. I think gentrification is good. And in a lot of ways, we do the first part of it really well,
Right.
which is money coming in the neighborhood. We do the second part of it very poorly, which is like, and I don't necessarily mean that's because the system is evil as much as like, how do we do that? That's a difficult thing to do. But I think if we can figure that out, that'd be tremendous. Because that gentrification isn't just a thing that happens in New York, it happens all over the world. It happens in Seoul, in my city, I mean, that's a crazy example if you think about it like that. I mean, those people built that city up from war, from nothing.
Yeah.
And now they're getting kicked out by big business and all these people in finance or even expats. And I mean, you're talking about, that's a real shame, And you got to think to yourself, who's gonna care more about this block? You or some kid that came and been here for 3 years and then the first sign of trouble, he's gone again,
Right. I get you. The first time I ever heard about gentrification, it was like one of my favorite movies. Was like Boys in the Hood, right? They got the part in there where one of the main characters' father, I believe, was like a real estate agent, and he noticed what was going on inside of the neighborhoods, right? When it came to gentrification. So, of course, at that age back then, I didn't understand it. But once again, I think Bedford-Stuyvesant, where I come from, I don't know. People can check the facts on this, but it may be gentrification capital right there, I believe, right? Being that once the Barclay was being established there, everybody getting migrated there. It's very easy to get to the city from there.
Yeah.
Very easy, depending on where you at inside of Bed-Stuy. All the attractions are very close. Right? So, being incarcerated and coming home and seeing what was going on, that was some years right there, right? So it was like, wow,
I'm noticing the change. I'm hearing my family talk about it now. I'm seeing it myself. To get deep down inside of it, and breaking down some of the things that you mentioned. Yeah, I don't really see nothing wrong. It's different parts to it. It's different levels to it. Bringing a business inside of a community and starting a business, a small business in there. But it's like the fabric is connected to the community. Is that business connected to it? That's the people who moving in, are they connected to the culture that was already established before they got there? I think those are always like the major issues when it comes to like gentrification, right?
Yeah.
And then I want to say thank you, and I want to say I had this conversation many times before with friends. I had this conversation, friends and family. I had this conversation with colleagues who view the work from afar, and I also had a conversation with those I want to say are strangers, but they're not really strangers. They just know of the work. Yeah, we noticed, we was the team at SOS noticed that we definitely was creating opportunity for Crown Heights to be safer, where people would want to visit more and create businesses and want to live here. Like,
I couldn't be here without that foundation.
I mean, when we look at it,
if I had the control,
yeah.
I would want. Dude, I pay tens of thousands of dollars to the city. If I had some control, I would rather go directly to the people who built this neighborhood. It should be going to y'all.
Thank you.
Why does it go to the? I don't get it. To me, it's all politics, you know. So,
and then me just being a human being at one point in time, you know, I've been with SOS for 5 years. So I've been with them before certain funding came. I watched when the funding came from the mayor's office, and then I had my opportunity to grow as well, starting there as a outreach worker / hospital responder, working my way up being a supervisor, working my way up into management, and then it became not just a program management, it became like a project management. Seeing these budgets, seeing these grants, being able to identify the money that was going around. Yeah, I'm happy that you said it, right?
I mean, you look at the mayor's wife, her Thrive New York City program, who spent almost $1 billion, which is astronomical. I mean, not even some of these Silicon tech companies that meet with like some of these VCs. Like, if you can raise $50 million, that's a knockout success that you guys have started. It's a huge round.
Right.
$1 billion is unheard of. And for us to get no return from that, not to mention, who is she? I don't remember voting for her. She's his wife, right? So here's also some of my frustration. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but in a lot of ways, I'm a conservative. I'm very much in the middle, and there's a couple things that go with that. One is, me being a Korean person, a lot of us, we're like Cubans, like there's an allergicness that comes from socialism because our countries were ravaged by it.
Right.
But something else that bothers me about it is, okay, if we can't actually make the money go to the people who should get it, like SOS, can we at least lower the barrier so that these kids with the dream make it easier for them to start a business? Because if you go to places like Korea, a lot of places in Asia, you're going to see this. Even if you go to the poorest neighborhoods, at nighttime, street food is everywhere. If you're in poverty, you can actually cook yourself out of poverty. You show up to night market, you come with your food, and if people like it, and a lot of people have built wealth on that. So there's
big industry hits, right?
Exactly, and their grandmother might be somebody with a street vendor. My grandmother, my mom's side was a street vendor. Maybe their kids will then be a restaurant owner, and their kids might be a finance person who knows.
So my dad's sister was a street vendor as well. My mom.
And it really bothers me that we don't really have that here because of DOH, because of the hardcore regulations that we have.
Yeah.
You can't just go out and start a business. I mean, In a lot of ways, that killed my business because it becomes untenable. I can't pay unemployment insurance and $15 an hour and food permit and liquor licenses, and why do I need to pay $10,000 for a piece of paper? I don't get that. I mean, coronavirus happens, and they say, oh, all right, you know what, now beer and wine and cocktails to go is okay. The world didn't fall apart, so why can't we do that before?
That's a fact, right? Yeah.
I used to do CBD here, CBD and teas. People really like that. Last year, July, DOA sends me a letter, oh, you gotta cut that. No more CBD. Last year, I paid almost $7,000 in fines to the Department of Health for things like I had a leak in the basement.
CBD is actually like,
Yeah, but they make these rules up. Or in the basement, I was downstairs and we have this leak that I couldn't fix because they kept taking the money that I needed to fix it out of their pocket, out of my pocket.
Right.
And then they come back, oh, it's not fixed. Here's another fine. Here's another fine. It becomes untenable.
Right.
And that frustrates me to a great degree. Did you know that in Brooklyn, you need to put more hours in to get your cosmetology license than to become a member of the force at the NYPD? If a kid wants to cut hair, and he or she is good at cutting hair, and they have this dream, they want to start a salon, why do we put this barrier in front of them? Let them do it. Let them chase their dreams.
That's funny. I gotta ask my sister how long she went to cosmetology school for, but she went to
Oh, she's
cosmetology
not right. And it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if you're in a situation where, and you also need to, let's say, I mean, there's a lot of support to go to school. You need someone to pay your rent. You need someone to take care of you. If you don't have that support system, it's like that dream is dead before it even started.
Yeah. That's working time.
Now,
Yeah.
where I get really despair or kind of depressed about it is on the right. The people who care about businesses are business oriented. They're also mixed in with these evangelicals and kind of racist people or what have you, right? I'm not saying all Trump supporters are racist, but all racists are Trump supporters. You see what I'm saying? And then that also frustrates because there are things that he did that I like. Not a lot, but his hardcore stance on China, for instance. I support that. Me being an Asian person, we much rather be under the power of the U.S. Being in control of Asia than China being in control of the Asia. And that's starting to shift. And that scares a lot of us. You see that going on in Hong Kong right now. That cannot happen. You can't let that happen. It's starting to happen. And no one until really Trump took that seriously.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other bad things to do, but I'm for instance, the New York Times, never, not once, trying to say that he did something good. That actually makes him stronger. Because people are going to think, okay, well, these guys are biased. And I feel you know what I'm saying? You just got to be honest. Be when he's right, he's right. When he's wrong, he's wrong.
That's it.
So that's my frustration with the right and with the left. That's all the people who actually give a fuck, right? I see that in political reality, I feel like more Democratic politicians got into it for the right reasons. That's what I see.
Okay.
But they're also mixed in with these people that have no idea how business works. They went from school, suburban school, to college, to grad school, to law school, to politics. They don't know what it's like to run a business. They just don't know. And they see a problem and there's a simple solution to it. Hey, you know what? There's a problem. Fast food workers, they don't make enough. All right, simple solution, $15 an hour. But that doesn't place into the nuance of guys like myself.
Right.
So here's how something like that affects me.
That's out of the corporation or some business, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, I got a guy here, he's a cook, he makes $15 an hour, right? He's doing a great job. I want to promote him to manager. He deserves more money. So I want to pay this guy $20 an hour. I can't do that if then I need to hire another one person to replace his position, and I need to pay him $15 out the door.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So what ends up happening is guys like that will come into my business, will spend a year getting really good. I put in all the investment of training this guy. teaching him everything I know. And then he just jumps ship to a restaurant that can actually afford it. And they reap all the benefits. Like in your situation, where you do all the work and other people reap the benefits. There's no way somebody on this side of the aisle is really going to understand the nuance of a situation like that.
Right. Yeah.
And that actually hurts everyone. Because the more I can grow my business, the more I can feed the people in this neighborhood, the more I can hire people in this neighborhood, and we all come up together.
Right.
But this antagonistic view of government over here and business over here, I don't even get that. I think honestly, business and government is the same thing. Whenever you get a group of people together, it's a business.
Right.
The NYPD is a business. You know, Rikers Island is a business.
Big one.
It is what it is. You know. So this whole thing of like left and right and private and public, I don't get it. You know, I think it's all the same thing.
Yeah, I could definitely relate, man.
Yeah.
Imagine having success down there with SOS, right? Because we do these recaps, and if you like me, I'm not just, as a manager, it's not just a job we working. We're going to be working, we're going to be learning together, right? You're going to be able to recite back some of the milestones that we accomplished. So imagine just going over data, and data is big because that's a data-driven program, and it's like, all right, there were 24 shootings in this neighborhood with 8 homicides, and you were able to drive that down to 3, right? With 0 homicides.
That's tremendous.
Tremendous, right? You already know the work that we did in Albany House. Albany House was a year and a half, one of the most notorious housing projects in New York City, in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
They went a year and a half without a gun-related incident. But what about right across in Weeksville, where it went close to 2 years, if not 2 years, with the same thing, without a gun-related incident, a gun-related homicide. So imagine the men and the women noticing all of this, and they can't even afford to live in Crown Heights, right? I literally got guys telling me because they got problems paying their bills, they rent, they really can't afford to live here, and they're looking for a pay increase. It's my job, right? Because I'm management, so it's my job to manage up and down.
That's horrible.
I gotta see this. I know this. Because
Right.
if I was in a management position, I probably would have been struggling with them as well, right?
Right.
Or strategic enough to get something going outside of that network. And now I have to manage up instead of powers to be and say, hey, I think the people there, they deserve more money. And it's like, why? I understand everybody has a job to do. It's like, listen, can you not see what's going on around here? Like, I know strategically, it's my job to put it in a professional manner and pitch it, which happens, right? But then it's pushback, and at times there was no raises, and it's like, wow, and that's the blows of confidence. To work ethic, that makes people not want to do their jobs, the capabilities that they know that they can do, right? If I know something happens in a certain area and I have a guy that's capable, he don't even have to get out of his bed at 2 or 3 in the morning. He can make a phone call and figure out what's going on in this neighborhood, in this section right here. He might not even want to answer the phone for me now. It's not nothing to do with me. That's what you said about the whole
What's in it for him?
situation, right?
What's in it for him?
So,
And that's a big.
that
That's
is
a.
dangerous. And if it's really hot out there, everybody said, we on the front line workers. Who's going to take care of their families if something really happens, right? There was nothing like really in place for things like that. So yeah.
And now all these people want to go out and protest, and I'm like, where were you when we were having these visuals in the neighborhood?
Absolutely.
Where were you? And also, why do you not have any real suggestions? Me being in this neighborhood, I can be like, oh yeah, defund the police, give it to these guys. That's the practical suggestions. I don't know what I hear is these kind of ideological things people just saying, I don't know what they're talking about. Abolish police. Or whatever. I'm like, alright, but listen, that's not even gonna happen. So what you're saying is not helping anyone. You're just saying things to make it's actually for you to happen.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? It's for your and that's a big problem. And like I said, I'm a conservative, meaning I am a conservative in that I don't want to tear down the institutions that we have. I think the system that we built here, a lot of people had to sacrifice for, a lot of people had to go through hard things for, but I think we have what we have, and I think we can make it work for us. I think I much rather fix it than tear it all down. And that's what I mean by when I'm a conservative. That being said, even with that being said, there's a huge problem in the system where the people who are doing the most important, the most productive work, trying to research new vaccines, doing the work you're doing, trying to decrease violence, trying to do something creative, like what have you. Like, these people don't get compensated enough. I'll put myself in that category. I mean, I had to go for. I made no money off of this, zero. And every month I'm paying money. Man, my landlord. From doing business here, I learned that no one makes money in this town except for the government, and the banks.
Wow.
And that's it. That's a problem. Now we have this situation where violence is coming back up, way up. Every year I hear something horrible happening just to this day, right?
Yeah.
And that should have been. But how do you do that? Because it's one thing to say we should do that, another thing to implement, and that's a difficult thing. I don't necessarily think that these things don't happen because the system is equal. I think these things happen because the bigger question of how do we make that work. For instance, you stop gun violence in the Albany houses. Let's say it helps this kid out who, because of what you did, one day becomes a lawyer and one day makes $200,000.
Right.
Are you gonna make that kid sign a contract saying that when he gets that money, now he's gonna give you a cut? Like, that seems fucked up too. Even though you kind of should get a part of that. Like, there's no question. Like, your classical capitalist free market thought is that if you put in value in, you get value out, and that's what the system is paying, so to speak, right? That's what people say.
Right.
So to become a millionaire, you probably create $1 million worth of value. I wouldn't be surprised if SOS and the work that you guys do have created multiples of tens of $millions in value.
Oh yeah.
In the generations that it helps directly the people,
Right.
the businesses that help come up, the people moving in. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of value you guys are creating. So why aren't you guys getting a piece of it? So that really. But if it's any comfort, I see it. And actually this is why I want to talk to you to say that to your face, to be like, hey, you know what? Like, it's a shame, really, because guys like you should be getting compensated for what you do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and when I look at it, right, it's a host of men and women that's out there. So and shout out to SOS because they pay well, right? They pay better than some of the other organizations that came after SOS, and I really seen many.
I introduced myself at the beginning of this video as Chef Yunha. I forgot to mention that I'm also an idiot because I didn't realize until the interview was over that my SD card had actually run out of memory. And the last 10-15 minutes of this podcast was just cut off. So I apologize about that. I promise this won't happen again. But the good news is Dave is going to come back and hopefully we can make this a reoccurring thing. And I wanted to help co-host this podcast. And a big topic that I want to address is exactly what he was talking about in the last 10-15 minutes of this interview. And basically what he was saying was this. He was reiterating the point that him and his staff, his team at SOS, they need to risk their lives and go out at night, away from their families, to address gun violence in this neighborhood. And the work that they do not only saves lives, but that it creates a tremendous amount of value for everybody in this community. Now, the fact that not only is Dave and his team not being compensated enough, but the fact that we as a society can't seem to incentivize people to work on the hardest problem in general. And that's a question that I'm definitely interested in talking to people that are smarter than me about and getting their take on it. And we'll see where this whole thing goes. But thank you for joining us. And I'm sorry that I had to put this little addendum here, but this was just our first episode. So, maybe I hope you can cut me a little slack, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. God bless. 감사합니다.